right, here we're back. I had to kind of become a sleuth for all of this. I'm really glad it's in my past because I don't think it's healthy to live like that. I don't think that when you start having to snoop in a relationship and you really don't trust that person and when you're constantly worried about them cheating, it's going to drive you crazy. I think it's really, really unhealthy. And it definitely really made me have like even more anxiety. But I was at the point where, I had forgiven him. So, as a Jehovah's Witness, when one party in the marriage commits adultery, the other party can decide if they want to divorce and then they're free to remarry, or if they want to stay in the relationship, but as soon as they forgave that person, then they're basically like, there's no going back. You forgave that person, and then you're stuck with them, so to speak. So here I was. Things were starting to get really weird again with Troy. And it's a series of a ton of little things that happens. And I don't even remember in what order, but it just all was like an explosion with hundreds of little bullets. So it's like the breaking point, but all these little things happened. For one, at the new job, they had like a work chat group, and I don't know which came first and what I saw first. So it may be out of order, but it's all these little events. And at the work chat group, they had a group with like the whole team, and then they had a group with like all the guys on the team. And it really does make me feel so bad for women in the workplace because it is sexual harassment. And even if you don't see it, you feel things too. So these guys, including the boss, they have this like chat going on who they want to bang in the office and who they really want to have sex with. And they started having nicknames for all these coworkers like Peaches because her booty was peachy and all this stuff. And I saw it one day and I'm like, oh my God, like you could all be fired for this. And you probably should, including the boss, because this is so low. And then one of the coworkers, he had just had a baby. I mean, newborn. We're talking like 2 weeks or so. And he asked, how do I cheat without her finding out? And Troy replies, and he gives him tips on how not to get caught when you're cheating on your wife. Because the coworker was a lot like Troy. It was like, I want to have a family and I want to have kids, but I also kind of on the side want to have like some side action. So that happened. And I'm like, you guys are all like awful and you're all going to get cheated. But mentally, I'm also like, crap, I forgave him in Jehovah's Witness terms. And right now, he's not per se cheating on me, but he's definitely like doing all this stuff that to me is a deal breaker, So I'm trying to juggle the two thoughts. And then he left this page open on the iPad, and it was like basically a blog where people talk, like, quote unquote locker room talk was not okay. It was not okay. But I didn't know who he was on that chat, on that blog. I didn't know his like user ID or username. And so I started pounding in keywords of stuff that I know that he was interested in. And I'm like, buddy, I am going to find you and I'm going to find out what you're posting. Because at this point, I needed to know. I needed to know who he really was. Not this fake Christian, how he puts on this show on how Christian he is. Like he went to every meeting. He always would go in service. Like right now he's disfellowshipped and he would write, you have to write a letter to the congregation to ask to be able to come back as a Jehovah's Witness. And I'm telling you, he would write them beautifully where you're like touched. And so, he's trying to come back and be reinstated. And it was around this time, I do think he finally did get reinstated. So actually, I think he was already reinstated. and I'm finding out all this stuff. So it's like, okay, you're acting like in your letters that you're writing to the congregation, like you're a changed man, and how you're gonna do all this better, and you're put on the new personality, and meanwhile, like nothing changed, nothing. So, um, so he's writing on this blog, and I'm trying to find him, and I am like driven at this point. I'm like, I'm going to find you. I don't know what his username is. I don't know anything, but I am driven. And suddenly I found hints of what I thought was him because an event happened kind of nearby his work, and he wrote about it. And bam, it was him. So then I go to that username and I start reading like all these dirty blog entries of his, and it was truly shocking. One of his favorite subjects is when female teachers are arrested for having sex with minors. He would post their mugshot and say not guilty. It was his favorite thing to talk about on this blog. And it's like just shocking to me. And then he wrote in one blog entry that if you're a teacher and you see a young teenager walking down the street, do him a favor and do the world a favor to take him to a hotel and to make a man out of him. I mean, he wrote that. I mean, I just was just like baffled, really, truly baffled. And then it was just so many like blog entries like that. And then they would like post pictures and it would be like, would bang, how'd you get her? Tinder, more pics, please. Teachers who sleep with students are saints. I'm like kind of looking at him because I have him in front of me. And then he goes to a trip out of town, like 2, 3 hours away. And while he is away, making all these blog entries, and I'm out of town, like what should I do? And people are posting pictures like to go to, the special kind of massage parlor. And he writes, maybe I should sign up for a Tinder account. And people are just like writing all this stuff. And then he talks about how he got edibles. Now, here's what's so shocking to me. Again, I don't care what people do at all, like whatever. But we're Jehovah's Witnesses. And how he talked about weed and drugs and all this was as if it was the devil itself. And so to read that he was actually doing weed was really shocking to me because I'm just like, I really I would have sworn, I would have put my hand in the fire that this guy would never, like, he's so squeaky clean and blah, blah, blah. And here he's talking about all this stuff and even like as how he used to do like weed and stuff. And I'm just like, what? Wow. And he talks about the process of how to get weed. And this was a little bit before it became like so legal everywhere. But I'm just like, wow, I don't even know this person. Like, I don't even know who he is. And it goes on um like to go into all these like really dirty posts, but one of the posts that he wrote was um my wedding day wasn't like my happiest day, and like neither was like when my kids were born. The happiest day of my life was when I was drunk in clubs hooking up with random girls. And it was like so heartbreaking to read that. It was so heartbreaking. Like, wow, that's really, really sad. Who are you? And it's almost like he has like multiple personalities. Because here he talks about like hooking up in clubs with girls, but then on the other hand, he talks about, you know, how he like on this blog he did not talk about hooking up with guys at all. He was like a guy's guy on this blog. And then there was a trip. And our marriage is just like falling apart. I think I know like this, I have to get out of there, but I'm still like in that Jehovah's Witness mindset. Like I'm not really free to leave him. And I go to the elders and I say, he's doing porn. He's doing all this stuff. He's writing all this stuff. I cannot justify living with him with the kids. And I think there should be like a reason that should be a reason to be able to leave somebody. And they didn't really tell me not to leave, but they were kind of like, well, you're not free to remarry. And I'm like, well, if he's doing porn and he's doing all this other stuff, he's definitely having sex too. Like there's no doubt in my mind that he's hooking up with people again. And they're kind of like, well, but you don't really know that, so you don't really have a reason. But they were okay. They didn't like say, no, you have to stay with them. They knew it was a mess. And so he had the next trip coming up, and he was going to a town only an hour away, not even an hour. And the kids that week, they had events. They had events at school, and they had like a talk at the Kingdom Hall. And Troy's like, well, I'm going to go away for the week. I'm going to stay in a hotel in this out of town. And I'm like, oh man, you could drive that. It's like 45 minutes. Like people commute to work for 45 minutes. You could definitely come home. And he's like, no, I really want to stay in the hotel. And I'm like, yeah, but the kids, they have like a talk and they have something at school. Like, I think you can come home. And on top of that, like dealing with a sex addict, for me, him staying in a hotel was so like, and this is so sad, you guys. It shouldn't even be like that. Like your husband, your spouse, your significant other should be able to just go to a freaking hotel and you not worry about it, you know? But with him, it was him that I was just a nervous wreck and worried about cheating and all this. And he's like, I'm going to the hotel. And right before he leaves, he starts picking a fight. And I'm not engaging. I'm just not engaging because I remember reading somewhere that some guys or some people do this where they pick a fight and then if they cheat, they're like, see, she's such a bitch. She fought with me. Like, I had to cheat. I had to find like some love somewhere. And so I felt like, oh, he just wants to like pick a fight so that he can leave and be all mad at me. And I'm not really like a huge fighter person. I don't really like throughout this entire ordeal, I didn't scream, yell, or I was always like really calm. I think I'm more like in shock a lot of times, but I'm not a screamer yeller at all. And and so, especially like I was also worn out and worn down. And so he's trying to pick a fight and I'm just not engaging. And then my son, he was really little at the time. He does something accidentally and Troy explodes cuz he got like his toe stubbed and my kid kind of like put like the chair on his toe a little bit. But he starts going like nuts on us and I'm just looking at him and I'm like, okay, it hurts, but really, like really. And my little boy was like running around and he goes, divorce him, divorce him. Which was, I will never forget this because it was so scary how Troy was screaming and yelling and then he left in a huff. And I'm like, he wanted to throw a fit. So he leaves. All this time, we had been in therapy. And at first, we we're trying to work on it. We're trying to work on it. And then the therapist did something that I think was genius. I think this really, truly helped me be able to break free. She says, there's a group of girls who are going through similar things. I want to put you in this support group with the other women. And I'm like, okay. So it was once a week we would meet and we would tell our stories and we would have so much sympathy and empathy for each other. But I looked at them and I thought, man, you're like so beautiful. You're so intelligent. Why are you staying with this person who does all this shit to you? I mean, every person had their own story, but it was crazy. And I'm like, why are they staying with these people? It's awful. And then I realized I'm staying with mine too. why am I staying? And I don't even really like him anymore, you know? Yes, part of it is the religion, but the other part was like, why are you with someone who's like this? And why are they all staying? And the therapist gave me a book to read, and it's called The Trauma Bond by Patrick Carnes. And I'm going to post that in my community thread. That book was everything. Like, it was just, it explained everything exactly how it was. And it also kind of made sense that I almost couldn't leave sometimes, and I didn't understand why. I didn't even like Troy anymore. Um, I was scared of him. We're all on eggshells all the time. Why are you here? And the book explained that I was in a traumatic bond. Please, please Google traumatic bonding. It's very much like Stockholm syndrome. It's where you get like attached to the person that abuses you. And this happens throughout like this roller coaster ride of high and lows. You form like, it's sort of like an addiction to that person. So like it's really bad, but all those like stress hormones and stuff, but then they're also the ones that provide the relief and the honeymoon period. So let's say like there's a kidnapper and he kidnaps a person, which that's a criminal activity and abuse. But then he's like really nice to the person, so they kind of start protecting their kidnapper, even though this dude like literally kidnapped you. And here you see the nice parts and you start justifying the bad behavior. It is important to read. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you deal with narcissists, please read this book. Do research on trauma bonding, because you don't even know you're in a trauma bond till you can recognize it. And another thing that this book explained was narcissism. Because I always thought a narcissist is just someone who's like into himself and thinks highly of himself, which definitely was Troy. Because to Troy, we all always had to look really good. So when we would go to the Kingdom Hall, we had to have like dress nicely. Our kids had to be beautiful. And that's why he put on that spirituality front. It was all like facade. It was all like a mask. The mask was so important. It was not ever like connections to people or heart to hearts or something. It was all like superficial stuff. And he really has like this ego where he has to be the best at everything, or he has to have like the best of everything, and his kids have to be the most beautiful. And he would show glimpses of that. He would say some things like that to me sometimes. And I'm like, that's weird. But the narcissist also has no empathy. He can't understand empathy. They go and cheat and they don't think anything of it. They just kind of go with their impulses and they don't think how it affects family, kids, wife, themselves. They don't think about those things. And on top of that, he had like a high risk lifestyle, which was really scary. Um, so the book Trauma Bonding. And then in the book, there's a chapter on religious abuse and trauma bonding, and my jaw like dropped to the floor. And it talked about how the church sometimes forces you in a way to stay in abusive relationships, and how also the church abuses you, but yet you stay. And I've seen that so much with the Jehovah's Witnesses, because people write it off as, but it is the truth. Like we have that sentence, but it's the truth. So we go through all this stuff that doesn't make sense, that shouldn't happen in a loving organization, but we add at the end, but it's the truth. Because basically what we think is like it's God's organization, but imperfect men rule it, or kind of come in and like kind of I don't know if ruling isn't really the right word, but you know what I mean. And so they're imperfect, and so they make mistakes, and so it's still like the truth, but sometimes bad things happen and you just gotta endure. Well, you're really in a trauma bond too. And I see that with like these abuse victims, where the parents are shocked, but yet they stay. there's so many stories of this, and they're like, well, the paradise is coming. We have to just wait on Jehovah and stuff. And it's also learned helplessness, which I think I definitely had too, like learned helplessness where you're just sitting and you kind of gave up, you know? And so this book about narcissism and trauma bonding for me was so important, including this group of women that I was with. And then one day I had like finished reading the book, and it was so hard because I have to say, like, my emotions were involved. Like, I wanted my family. I really kept wanting to fight, and here it's a breakup, and even all this stuff happened, it still hurts so much. And it's also kind of like a rubber band. You kind of get pulled back in so many times. And so um I knew there was no fixing from this. I knew, like, it is over, like, it's over. And so I went to the group with the women, the women's group, and we're like starting out, and I stand up and I say, I know that I need to divorce him. This is a fact, and I will do it. And I have to totally be honest here. Like, I kind of went back once because I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. But And then I pulled myself out of that again. So I'm like, no, 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 I have to do it. I have to do it. And this was another breaking point. So when this is all at the same time, Troy went to out of town when he just left in a fury, and I felt like he picked a fight. And I'm like, okay, I have to pull the plug. Something's up. I need some evidence. I need evidence that I have full reason and I'm not wrong, that my gut isn't wrong. Something's going on. And really, like, it should be enough that you already feel this way, but I was still a Jehovah's Witness, so I felt like I needed more reason. And I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking, how can I, like, prove it to myself that he's up to all his old tricks again? How can I prove it again? And I'm laying there, and and I think, you know what? Maybe I'll look through our phone bill if there's, like, phone numbers or something. I don't know what I was thinking. I was, like, grasping for straws here. But I go through our phone bill, and I kind of start like Googling random numbers, like who's this, who's that, like not getting anything. Um, and then I Google this one number, and it's from Tinder. It's the number that Tinder sends the verification code for when you sign up for Tinder. And I was like, oh my gosh. And again, he wasn't really far away because I had asked him to come home at night. And so I download Tinder. Never used it. Didn't even know like how you do all this swiping and stuff. I had no idea. And I'm just like, I'm going to find you and then I'll know it's over. And so I start swiping. I'm trying to figure out the app. And I swiped through a lot of people. I made the radius so it's like 45 minutes to an hour away. And suddenly his picture pops up. It's his picture when he was actually in service, when he was preaching. So he looks kind of like, dressed spiffy. And it's a picture with our kid in the picture. On Tinder. He put a picture on Tinder while he was preaching, and our kid is in the picture to like bait people. He didn't use his real name, but the fact that he used his actual picture shows me that he was like trying to meet somebody, because otherwise you'd use like a fake picture. But he was trying to meet somebody. And to me, I'm like, okay, now I know. He's doing this again. Like, forget it. It's over. Like, it's over. So while he's on the trip, I move all my stuff out of the bedroom. Didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't even, like, I couldn't even move out and go to an apartment. Plus I have kids and all this stuff. I couldn't even, like, leave. I would have loved to kick him out, but he didn't want to go. So I just moved all my stuff to the other side of the house. And two of the kids were kind of sleeping in one room anyways, so there was like an empty room, and I just basically moved into that room. So here he comes home from the business trip. Oh, and he got gifts for everybody, including me, which hadn't happened in a long time. And I'm like, weird, but no thank you. Refuse to take it. And he's like, no, please take it. And I'm like, no. So then he goes into the bedroom and he notices, like, I moved everything out that was mine. And he comes back out and he says, is that it? It's over? And I'm like, yeah. And it was a Friday night and he just looks at me. And it was almost kind of like, yay, now I can do whatever I want to. He goes and showers and sings in the shower. He gets dressed like really kind of nicely, puts on like eau de cologne, and then he walks past me and the kids, goes out the door, and leaves. And I'm just like, this is so weird. Where did he go? Like, what? He was so excited. And the story gets yet even crazier. We'll continue it tomorrow. Right, here we're back, episode